They said, we'll do it if you write a book on the restaurant industry in Youngstown and on Strauss's department store. So I found myself in the unenviable position of writing 3 books at one time.
BusinessJournalDaily.com 3 Minutes With is brought to you by Farmers National Bank.
Who's the only local bank with a mobile mortgage app? Farmers. Download the app to contact your lender, calculate payments, securely scan and upload documents, and check the status of your loan. Fiercely local, fiercely loyal, Farmers.
I didn't find myself in a field related to liberal arts and hence writing until I was a young adult. You know, I spun my wheels for a while in art.
Didn't we all?
And yeah, right. And but once I got involved in writing, I think things really started to happen. And journalism is not what I stuck with, but I owe a real debt to journalism because I think that when you study field, I did have a history minor as an undergraduate, but I think people can teach you how to research, but they don't always teach you how to write. And they don't always teach you to write in a way that engages people.
Yeah.
And so I think that was an invaluable experience. The 10 years that I spent in journalism was absolutely invaluable to what I did later because, and then getting a doctorate in foundations of education with a focus on educational history, taught me, how to research. But, and there were 2 schools of thought when I was at Kent. There were people who looked at my journalism background and said, oh, well, journalists, they're so superficial. You hear that. The academics will say that they really don't get to the nub of an issue, and but the people that I gravitated to were the ones that said, "Thank God, a graduate student who can actually write." Okay,
sure.
So that was the person who ended up directing my dissertation, Dr. Natasha Levinson. She co-directed it with another professor named Avril McClelland. I had to start looking for options beyond academia. And I think the person who really helped a lot was Dr. Sherry Lincoln. I just started getting involved with organizations. I got involved with Action. Father Ed Noga encouraged me to do that. I worked closely with Rosetta Carter, and I was kind of a media liaison for a while. I also became involved with Steel Valley Voices, which was a kind of an online archive that was sponsored by the YSU Center for Working Class Studies, and for which Dr. Lincoln was the co-director at that point. She became aware of my work in another organization called the Ethnic Heritage Society, which Father Joseph Rujak had founded, and I had the position of co-coordinator. And we had a series of talks. They were primarily held in the back room at Kravitz's. And Kravitz's Delicatessen. And in any case, you had people from various ethnic, immigrant and migrant communities. We had, for instance, members of the Congregation of Tabernacle Baptist who were trying to rediscover their history because there was a big debate within the congregation about when they were actually established. And they did arrive at what they thought was a viable date for the foundation, for the establishment of the congregation. And I had directed them to Pam Space, who worked with them and was very impressed with their enthusiasm and their competence. But what they felt intimidated about was the prospect of putting this together in some kind of narrative. And so I agreed to help them with that. And I did some interviews with a number of the older members of that committee. So there were some interesting anecdotes in there as well. And that was, when I say published, it was not published, but there was something was put together that was available to the congregation. And when Dr. Lincoln became aware of that, it turns out she was also part of a committee at then Congregation Road of Shalom that wanted to put together a history of the Jewish community. She approached me and she said, I was impressed with the fact that a white guy could write empathetically about an African-American congregation, and I wonder if a Gentile could write empathetically about the Jewish community.
Sure.
And it so happened I did have some connections in the community up to that point. I had written for the Jewish Journal, so there was a friendly relationship, obviously. But I obviously did not believe that I could tackle it without the participation of somebody who had in-depth knowledge of the community. And that, of course, was the late Joshua Foster, Jack Kravitz's nephew, a very talented historian who sadly is no longer with us, died at a very young age. But he, so that was the first project, but it was not the first project published, which is interesting. Well, I contacted the History Press, which had done a very fine book by the name of Remembering Youngstown, edited by Mark Paco. And I was impressed with the quality of that book because it was the first one that wasn't really just a picture book. It had, a lot of content. And so in any event, they agreed to do it, but conditionally. For one thing, they were concerned about the fact that despite the fact that I'd been in journalism, my only book-length manuscript was a dissertation.
Okay.
So they said, we'll do it if you write a book on the restaurant industry in Youngstown and on Strauss's department store. So I found myself in the unenviable position of writing 3 books at one time.
Sure. Right.
Co-authors were pretty essential, and they were
Right.
invaluable for a number of reasons. They made some very good contributions, but it simply wasn't an option to pursue those independently.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what happened.
BusinessJournalDaily.com 3 Minutes With is brought to you by Farmers National Bank.
Who's the only local bank with a mobile mortgage app? Farmers. Download the app to contact your lender, calculate payments, securely scan and upload documents, and check the status of your loan. Fiercely local, fiercely loyal, Farmers.